Hello and welcome to the Sonic Cinema podcast. My name is Brian Scuttle and thank you for joining me at www.sonic-cinema.com as well as the Sonic Cinema podcast YouTube channel. You can check us out on Apple, Google, and Spotify, basically wherever you get your podcasts. Hope you check out the podcast. For more, there's a lot of great episodes that we've gotten over the years as well as coming up. Also check me out at patreon.com/SonicCinema. There you will get things like the short film block review breakdowns that I do every festival, such as this one, the Atlanta Film Festival. And there's a lot more on there if you go to patreon.com/SonicCinema. This year was my fourth year covering the Atlanta Film Festival, and it continues to be a rewarding one. I'm really grateful. I'm always been able to go back ever since I started going in 2019. And this year was no different. This was the first year since 2019 that we did not have a drive-in component to the festival. So all of the screenings were indoors, and it was really great to get back to that and to feel like some normalcy was coming back to the festival, even though they are continuing to do the virtual program, and that really was beneficial to me this year because of the nature of my ability to cover the festival this year. It was one of those. This year has been a bit different. I've in each of the film festivals that I've covered, Sundance, Renegade, and now the Atlanta Film Festival, I've had to kind of straddle doing work as well as covering the film festival. This one was the one that was very clearly defined as basically having to go as much with my work schedule as I could to determine which screenings I went to. And that's where the virtual component really came in. If they didn't have that virtual component, I probably wouldn't have been able to cover it this year in a way that I felt like I could do justice to the festival. But was able to, and I saw about 50 plus features and short films throughout the 11 days of the festival, and that was really gratifying to do. There were some screenings that, of course, I missed throughout the week, but ultimately, I got to most of the movies I was really interested in going to for one way or another, and a lot of them were done by screeners. I only went to probably about 7 or 8. In-person screenings this year. I did all the short films on virtual. That was just the best way to do it. And it was a really great year. And what we're going to do with this is we're basically going to run down some of my favorites and best of the festival. And it's only going to be a few categories, but I've got a couple of interviews that I want to share with you, and we're going to start with the best short film category. And I saw 5 short film blocks this year, 2 that were Georgia filmmakers exclusive, and then 3 others that dealt with things like giving experimental cinema as well as just surreal, almost genre-based filmmaking. And at least those last 3 categories are included here. And the third one is number 3 for me for my best shorts is Don't Go Where I Can't Find You, which tells the story of a composer who writes a piece for a loved one who passed away, whom she thinks is haunting her house, and it's a way of connecting with that. I'm a big proponent of film music. I love when music is an integral part in the film, and I think that's something that this movie does really, this short does really effectively. And it was one that just really connected with me in a big way because of that. Second one is She Keeps Me from director Erica Orofino. And I had a chance to talk to her. We'll share that after I go through my number one selection. She Keeps Me is the story of two sisters, one of whom has mental health issues. She is bipolar. And one wants to go off and go to college. But when something is revealed, those plans seem to go by the wayside. Number one was a short film called Eternity on a Loop, and this was an interesting one. This is part of the experimental short film program, and it is about a one of God's workers who takes a vacation on Earth, and it's basically them describing their feelings on Earth, and it's a use of images and sound that is really quite beautiful. If you get a chance to see it at any other film festivals, I cannot recommend it enough. And with that in mind, I had a chance to talk to Erica Orofino, the writer and director of She Keeps Me. It was a late addition to my interviews, but I'm really glad I was able to talk to her, and I hope you enjoyed that conversation. So the first thing I want to say is congratulations for having She Keeps Me at the Atlanta Film Festival. And it actually was part of the first short film block that I watched for the festival. And I really loved how it looked at mental illness and family dynamics and the challenges that come from that. So first of all, congratulations for having it at the festival.
Thank you.
Where did the inspiration for the movie come from?
So I would say that I tend to really pull from personal experiences when I'm writing. And this film in particular is a story that's very close to me because I come from an Italian family, and I'm someone who has struggled a lot with mental illness. I still do sometimes. And I have a brother and mother who also struggle. And so I feel like I've been on both sides of the coin. Like I've been an Alessandra and I've been a Lena before. And so I was really interested in kind of exploring like both sides of that, like what it feels like to be somebody who loves someone with a mental illness, and what it feels like to be somebody who struggles with one. And I was really interested in showing both of that, both those sides.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that is so impactful about the film is the fact that it doesn't it makes it really shows the struggle on both sides. It really struggle, and especially as with somebody who with the main character who's so very much wanting to, she's been looking forward to going off to university and going off to college and leaving, but at the same time, and so when something happens that kind of puts that in jeopardy, she, her first reaction is naturally one of being upset, one of being emotional, and then something you see something happen, and you see that there's that change in her, and just the real is it's one of the hard things about caregiving that I think a lot of people who've never necessarily been in that position don't necessarily realize. It's like on the one hand you have this desire that you want to be able to live your own life, you want to be able to be independent, but at the same time you can't, and that struggle was very very well observed in the film.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I think that's very apt. Like, I think that like It's hard to describe the feelings of like being in that position, like being a caretaker. I think that they're like part of the motivation for me to tell this story is that there are so many conflicting feelings about the being in that situation. Like there's a lot of guilt if you put
Mm-hmm.
yourself first. There's also a lot of like sometimes there can be like shame associated with it. Like if you are from like a European family or like a different kind of like a culture that kind of puts family over everything, then if you're not doing that, then you feel like you're almost like bringing shame to the family or
Yeah.
like you're not like performing your duty. And so I think for Alessandra, that's what she's caught between is like, how much do I put myself first and how much do I need to put my sister before me?
Mm-hmm.
and and in the end, um there was an earlier draft of the script where I actually had the ending ambiguous, where you don't know if she stays or goes, but I felt like it would have a stronger impact if I had her choose something, and
Mm-hmm.
so she chooses to stay. And I think that having her choose to stay makes more of a point
Mm-hmm.
than not knowing, and I prefer that actually.
Yeah, I no, I definitely would agree with that choice because I did think the ending was quite powerful because of the fact that it really hammers home that it ultimately hammers home just how difficult that being a caregiver, being somebody who cares about your family, but at the same time has that has that part of you that you want to be independent, but you have to understand that you're never going to be as independent as you want to be. And I think yeah, the ending was quite powerful with that. Um, were there any particular, other than the decision as far as what to do with the ending, were there any particular challenges that you came across when it came to making the movie?
Yeah, I would say like a pretty something that was pretty consistently top of mind was the portrayal of mental illness in the film and being very aware of the way that Lena is going to be perceived by audience members, because I didn't want Lena is the sister with bipolar disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't want Lena to come across as like this totally irrational, just person who's doing things for no reason and she's just like mean or she's just cruel. And so I had to be very careful with showing like a balance between the behavior that she exhibits, but then also her own justifications and like it all those behaviors coming from a place of like truth for her.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it part of what helped shape this narrative for her is the scene towards the end where we see that she's when she has a psychotic episode and she's in the middle of the street naked, and we see like that's I think like the most vulnerable that we ever see her in the film. Obviously she's
Mm-hmm.
naked and having a break, but like a psychotic break, but it's the scene that kind of rounds out her arc a little bit, because that's the moment where you really see how much she suffers.
Yeah.
And so I think, yes, like the portrayal of Lena was like a fine line, I think. And the other thing was the drowning scene, because the drowning scene could have been like super gratuitous, or we didn't want it to feel like extremely violent.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to show on screen like a mentally ill person being like drowned by a group of people. Where in earlier drafts of the script, it was all the friends who also took part in this.
Mm-hmm.
And then as we kind of started honing in on the themes in the film, it didn't make any sense, and it made much more sense to have it just between the two sisters.
Yeah.
Yes, and so I think
Mm-hmm.
that was another thing that we paid really close attention to, was just trying to be really delicate with the themes and the portrayal of mental illness in the film.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that scene it would have sent the wrong message if
Mhm.
it had been the group. The fact that because of the fact that it is ultimately about the sisters, and the fact that it's essentially all of Alessandra's frustrations, all of her anxieties just coming out, and it's that's what makes it that's what makes it such a wrenching film to watch, and it really was. It was really something. I mean, it's like I'm an only child, but I do know people who struggle with severe mental illness, and and I've seen it up close, and it's not easy. It's hard to it's sometimes hard to empathize with them, and I know that's one of the things that I think one of the things that this film does so well is that you you see her go through the almost through the entire gamut of emotions that one has when a loved one is struggling with mental illness, and you have the empathy, you have the anger, you have the frustration, um, and it's just not as black and white as anybody would ever make it out to be. So it was really quite something to be able to watch this movie.
Thank you so much. I really that's like all I've ever like all I want to hear is like that. That's the whole point is I'm trying to show the different shades that exist in between the black and white because it's never black and white.
Yeah.
And the best thing that has come out of putting this film out for me is hearing people from the audience come up to me and say like, "Oh my God, I really feel like you understand what I've gone through. Like this is me and my brother, or me and my sister, or me and my mom." And it's amazing how many people, you feel kind of alone in your story sometimes until you put your story out there, and then it just connects everybody, and you're like, wow, all these
Yeah.
people have gone through this too, and it makes you feel less alone.
Was this the first festival for the film?
No, so the film has been so far. It screened at Pendants Film Festival in Toronto, which is and it won Best Canadian Film there.
Okay.
And it has screened in a small town in Ontario called Hamilton, and it's going to Oakville, which is another town in Ontario. But it's also I can't say yet what other festivals it's gotten into, but
Okay.
it's making the rounds.
Okay. Okay. No,
Yeah.
that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, I cannot. I certainly hope people get a chance to watch this movie. I think it's, and one of the things that really I I feel like one of the things I know in my personal struggles with I've struggled with stress and anxiety and all of that over the years, and sometimes when I've been put in a caregiver position, it it's really flared up, and one of the things that as I've been able to explore that more through me being able to point to positive reflections on whether it's dynamics and mental between mentally people who struggle with mental health in different ways, whether it's portrayals of mental health. I think that's one of the most important things I think cinema can provide, and I think this film is a great example of that. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for saying that.
Hmm. And I definitely hope that people, if they're on the film festival circuit and some of the film festivals it plays at, do get a chance to check it out, because it is really quite a rewarding experience. So
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
um, next up is the best documentary. And documentaries are something I always try to make a case of watching when it comes to the Atlanta Film Festival. I feel like this festival, more than anything else, really provides some fascinating ones to watch. And this year was no exception. I didn't get to as many as I usually do, but I think they did a really great job programming this year. So my top 3 documentaries for this year were Only I Can Hear, which is a short documentary, it's less than an hour, about 3 codas, children of deaf adults, and how their lives are. And they connect at a week-long retreat with other codas, and it basically goes through their emotional processes of being the only people who can hear in their family and what that's like. And as much as I enjoyed Coda, this year's Best Picture winner, I feel like Only I Can Hear just gets a little bit richer in discussing that process, and we get a sense of more going on, and we get a sense of just how challenging that life is, and it's but also how rewarding that life is too. And it's really a lovely documentary, and I hope people get a chance to see it. Number 2 on my best documentary is Master of Light, and it tells the story of George Anthony Morton, who is a classical painter who spent some time in federal prison, but as he comes out of prison and out of that life, he's wanting to see more black faces done in the way of the old Dutch masters that he studied in school. And he takes a trip home, and he uses that trip not only to reconcile with his past, but also to paint his family in that style. And it's really fascinating to look at in the terms of artistic inspiration, as well as the way our outlook on family can grow over the years. And I really found it to be quite a rewarding documentary. It's worth checking out. But my best documentary at the festival this year was Refuge, and you can listen to my interview with the filmmakers on the Sonic Cinema podcast and the YouTube channel, and that was a bit longer, so I decided to make that its own thing. It was great to talk to them about. They start off telling the story of a really wonderful melting pot city in Clarkson, Georgia, and then they were gifted this opportunity to get to see a friendship start up between a Muslim doctor whose family came here post 9/11 and a former soldier who was also formerly a member of the KKK. And the friendship that they achieve is really inspiring, and it's really a rewarding watch. It's one of those documentaries that I just cannot get out of my head. It's such a beautiful watch. It's well worth checking out. Before we get to the narrative features, I want to do my favorite acting performances of the festival. Number 3 was Dakota Johnson in Cha-Cha Real Smooth. There was some really lovely acting in that film, but Dakota Johnson, I think, gave the best performance as a mother whose daughter has autism, and she's really having to make big choices about what is best for her and her daughter in the moment, and I think that's one of those things that I really loved about the film. Next up is Dale Dickey in A Love Song, which I missed at Sundance, but I really loved, and I could have included Wes Studi in a joint discussion with her, because I feel like he's just as important as she is to the way this movie works. Dale Dickey is a widower in this film who goes to meet an old childhood friend, played by Wes Studi, at a trailer camp. And there's tension as to whether he will show up, and then when he does, there's tension as to what's going to happen. It's really beautiful work by both of them. Dickey in particular, though, is tremendous, and she is really warm and lovely in the film. The best acting, though, I think I saw at the festival this year was John Boyega in 892 from the opening night film, and he does a riveting job playing a former soldier who has financial issues and feels like he's at the end of his rope and has to rob a bank, and or at least hold up a bank. And the way Boyega plays the character, the way he allows us to see the individual as sympathetic, even when this situation is unfolding, and because of the way this situation is unfolding, it's really beautiful. It's terrific acting on his part. That brings us to the best narrative feature, and my number 3 is my final in-person movie that I saw, The Murder Podcast, which is a wonderful comedy about two friends who decide that when their initial podcast seems to have peaked in popularity, they turn to true crime. But in doing so, they kind of bite off a bit more than they can handle. So that's a really fun comedy. I can kind of see that maybe coming to Shudder at some point over in the next year, and it's gonna be interesting to see how that is received. I think it'll go over really well with audiences. It's really a fun, goofy comedy. It stays within the characters, but it's also just a bit crazy, and it's a lot of fun. It was a great way to end my in-person festival this year. Number 2 is 892, and it's the story of Brian Brown Easley. John Boyega is fantastic in this film. It's a terrific thriller, and the way that the director, Abi Damaris Corbin, tells this story is just absolutely fantastic. And I actually had a chance to talk to her on the red carpet, and we'll be sharing that after I get to my number 1 favorite best narrative feature of the festival, and that is Haya Wasim's Quickening, which is about a young woman of color in Canada who's struggling between family and her own life. And this was a movie that really floored me in unexpected ways. By the time that the movie ended, I was not expecting the way I would be impacted by this film by the end, and it was just really quite a striking film to watch. It was available on the virtual program, and it was absolutely lovely. That being said, I did say that I had a chance to talk to the co-writer and director of 892, Abi Damaris Corbin, on the red carpet. It was the first time the official red carpet had been done since 2019. I start off on the red carpet with just a couple of quick questions because I hadn't seen the movie yet, and I didn't get my initial question on the audio, but I start off by asking her the difference between making a short film and making a feature film. I hope you enjoy that brief discussion.
I went to this tech conference and met James Cameron, and I immediately made a beeline for him. I was like, give me all the advice that you can give me for making the transition from short film to feature. He said, it's the same thing, you're just doing it a lot more in a row. Mm-hmm. So you're making 11 short films instead of 1 in a row. And it really is that. And I had a great team around me, and I'm really happy with that.
What were some of the biggest challenges that you had in making the film during COVID?
learning to project from my mask. Yeah, it's hard because everybody's siloed, and you just have to find creative ways to make sure that your team gets together and is able to still find the unity and purpose in the midst of it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Pleasure.
After the film, I went to the opening night after party and was able to talk to her again now that I had seen the movie, more specifically about things in the movie. I apologize for the audio here. It was a really, the audio in this was pretty atrocious, but I think I cleaned it up about as well as I can. The most important thing is you can hear her answers to the questions, and I hope you enjoy that.
Now that I've actually had the chance to see the film, let me just say it's a wonderful film.
Thank you.
It was really tense, really, the suspense was just right, but also, like Chris was saying in the Q&A, the humanity really comes through.
Thank you.
One of the things I really noticed is a strong use of close-ups and an emphasis on the characters' faces. Was that something that you had planned out from the beginning, or is that something that just came out when you were developing the film and just as you were filming?
We planned it out ahead of time. We looked at a lot of Jonathan Demme's close-ups. He's the master of the close-up.
Yeah.
So my cinematographer, Doug Emmett, and we were pretty litigious in doing our work and our shot listing, our plans. And we knew that this film lived or died in Brian's face. And the audience, by living or dying, I mean the audience will connect or disconnect based on how engaged we are with Brian. And we did that through Brian's face. And John, I mean, you put a camera on John and his soul is exposed.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful we made that.
He's tremendous in the film. He really is. I love that we spend so much of the time with Brian and in the bank. Was there ever a time where you were questioning whether to cut back and forth between conversations, or did how much of you staying with him in the bank was something that you knew you wanted to do, and what was the tension between staying with him and going to the outside world?
It's a tricky balance, to be candid, because you want the audience to feel as Brian did in the claustrophobia, but also the audience has a breaking point where they just can't take it anymore. So what we did is we tried to dance on the line of that, sometimes successfully, other times, but it was intentional. And from a script level, we wanted it to be a chamber piece, where initially it's a violin, and then other strings come to join, and then the orchestra. So it starts small, and then it opens up.
Yeah. Okay. Were there any movies that you thought, I mean, this is obviously based on true story, you don't want to be too inspired by fiction, but were there any movies that you had in mind when you were developing the story as far as how things that you were inspired by? Like you just mentioned Jonathan Demme with the close-ups. That's a great example.
We really stole from everyone. I stole from Prisoners by Denis Villeneuve. Master. We drew from. There's just so many. But Prisoners is a good one to hold on to because I stole quite a few things from that.
Who are some of the filmmakers you find yourself most inspired by? Not just for this film, but just in general.
Ang Lee, Denis Villeneuve, since we're already talking about him, Catherine Bigelow, Ava DuVernay.
much. I hope you have a good rest. I hope you have a good rest of the night, and congratulations.
Thank you. You too, Brian.
So next up are my 3 favorite films of the festival, and I don't know if this is necessarily the case. I mean, I basically tried to highlight different movies in all of these different categories. So technically speaking, not all of these are completely accurate, but I wanted to highlight the ones that really impacted me the most. But that being said, my 3 favorite films here are ones that I do think I'm going to be thinking about a lot and really appreciating as the year goes on. Number 3 is Cha Cha Real Smooth, which we already talked about with Dakota Johnson. And this is just really a lovely comedy drama. It's not exactly a romantic comedy, but it also is great in how it approaches the story of somebody who isn't quite sure what they want to do in their life in their 20s. And I mean, it's something I think more and more people can identify with. And the film really, Cooper Raiff as the writer, director, and star does a really good job capturing that. Next up is a short film from the Georgia fictional block called Glitter Ain't Gold. It's a really sweet story about a young boy who thinks that he needs a gold chain in order to impress girls. And he works to make money to get the gold chain. He's got a friend who he talks to throughout. It's really just a sweet coming-of-age story. And all 3 of these are actually coming-of-age stories. It's actually kind of funny how that worked out. But if you get a chance to see Glitter Ain't Gold at some point over the year at a film festival or in general, it's really a wonderful story. I cannot recommend it enough. Then my favorite film is Portraits from a Fire, which is another coming-of-age story. It's about a teenager who spends his time making silly movies and inviting people from his reservation to contribute and to watch it. When another teenager seems to inspire him to make something more from the heart, he's hoping that it will bring him and his father, who's been cold towards him over the years, closer together. The director, Trevor Mack, does a really great job of making this both a very personal film as well as a very interesting film cinematically. And this is a movie that I think is going to stick with me throughout the year, and I do think this could very well be one of my favorite films of the year, just in general. I really love this film quite a bit. So that brings us to Best Film, and these are 3 movies, short films, and both short films and features that really landed with me hard. And the first one is one that I saw on opening day, actually, of the festival in the Careworn Cadences short film block. It's called The Bond, and it's about a woman who is pregnant in prison who is hoping to get her and her child into the daycare wing of the prison. And she does everything right that she's trying to do everything right that she can to make that happen. And something happens that really takes that from her. And it was such a powerhouse film. It's one of those films that where the issue of pregnancy and safe pregnancy is a significant one recently. And there was actually a short film in the documentary Georgia block that kind of touched on the same subject, but in the real world capacity of women giving birth in prison and how dangerous that can be. And it just highlighted just how accurately the Bond got the emotions at work in that. And it was really is really a wonderful early start to the festival for me. Number 2 was from that documentary block of Georgia filmmakers, and it's Bad Dream, which is a spoken word look at the dark realities of white privilege versus black truth, and the stark differences in what somebody like me would have just be normal behavior that I could do and not necessarily have to worry about, but what black people sometimes do have to worry about, and is just it's very moody in the way it's shot, and it's shot very minimally, but the impact is extraordinary, and it was one that really connected with me on the last day of the festival. The best film I saw this year at the Atlanta Film Festival, though, was Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, the feature-length version of a series of short films made by Dean Fleischer Camp. And this mockumentary about a filmmaker who happens to be staying at an Airbnb where Marcel and his grandmother live, trust me when I say you are not prepared for the emotional impact this movie is going to have on you. It is really, aside from just being a really lovely comedy and animated movie in terms of the stop motion animation, it is just a beautiful story about connecting with another individual and somebody you would least expect to connect with. And I just really was quite taken by this, and I'm so glad I got a chance to see it at the festival. I wasn't sure until I got my work schedule that I was going to be able to see it, and it was far and away the best film I saw at the festival. All of these 16 movies that I've mentioned, they're all completely worthwhile. Most of them I think you'll start to see trickle out in the summer. I know 892, Cha-Cha Real Smooth, and Marcel the Shell are coming out this summer. Any other film festivals, by all means, check out some of these. It's really a great selection, and I want to thank the Atlanta Film Festival, the Atlanta Film Society, the Plaza Theater, and everybody who works on the festival for giving me the chance to cover it year in and year out. It's probably my favorite programming of any of the festivals that I've covered on a regular basis, and I am extremely grateful for the opportunity. That's going to be it for this episode of the Sonic Cinema Podcast. Coming up this month, we also have another continuation in our established classic series, and we're going to be talking film scores and dinosaurs in June. So I hope you take a look at that. And this is Brian Scuttle for the Sonic Cinema Podcast, and check us out at www.sonic-cinema.com. Thank you very much.